Hey everyone. So I'm trialing StreamYard because I wanted to put this on the screen. So we'll see how it goes. So this report, Breaking Bias, Building Justice, has come out in the last couple of days. So either 10th or 11th of June. It's the 11th of June today that I'm recording this. And I've had a bit of time to have a read through and discuss it with some other professionals as well, and so I wanted to share my thoughts. But before we get started, I want to say that whilst I don't agree with the report on many things, I do agree that family court is not doing a good job and changes absolutely need to be made. I just don't believe this is the way to go about it. So that's my caveat. I will also say that I work with men and women who are victims of family court, and everything I do is gender inclusive. I focus on behaviours, and the reason I do that is because court focuses on behaviours, and in my opinion, court should focus on behaviours and not gender. That's not to say that gender doesn't play a part. I'm sure it does. I'm sure there's conscious and unconscious bias around gender and the role in family court. I acknowledge that. That's an argument for another day. But I think what we want to talk about here, I'm going to talk about this report here, and I'll bring those elements in rather than having a larger debate on who is or who isn't biased and how that shows up. So that's kind of my starting point from here. I mean, I don't know who these people are that have written it. I've no interactions with them whatsoever, and I've got nothing against anyone that is involved in this. What I would say is that Charlotte Proudman is the person that commissioned this report or funded this report. So we know the lens that's going to be seen through. So for me, that immediately is a red flag, because she is very anti-fathers. And I say fathers. Now, she will argue that she's against abusive fathers. My argument against that is I'm not sure she knows how to differentiate between a safe and an abusive father, or whether she even cares how to differentiate between that. I stand by it. And the other person is Adrien, Barnette, who I would say the same thing. Very anti-men, anti-fathers. And if that's how they want to live in this world, that's fine. This isn't a personal judgment on them for how they live their life and the choices that they make and the experiences that they've had that have shaped those decisions. My argument about that perspective is like asking someone who loves strawberry milkshake to review flavors of milkshake. Guess which one's going to win? Oh, strawberry milkshake's won. None of us are going to be surprised by that. And that for me is the danger here, is we know what they're going to be trying to say, because their methodology is agenda-led rather than letting the evidence. They're not interested in the evidence per se, as a whole picture. They are choosing what evidence suits the point that they're trying to get across. And again, just want to clarify, I am not saying that everything within this report is wrong. I'm just saying as a report or a research article, whatever they're presenting it as, it is highly flawed. And if you are producing, I'm producing a research article at the moment on Kafkas and false allegations, and I'm trying to go in without leading the audience on the participants rather, on what I want them to say. I don't want a particular outcome. I just want to know what is going on. Whereas these two, they want a particular outcome. And I can argue that because of what we've seen in the past and their methodology in this particular report. I don't even like calling it a report, paper. So anyway, that's where we're going to start with. And I'm not going to go through the whole thing. They're basically saying 72.5% of all judgments contained at least one instance of judicial victim blaming. 62.5% was subtle, which again to me is very therefore subjective. If it's subtle, it's subjective, so it's based upon the perception of the person reading it. These three who have been commissioned by these two are the readers, so their subjectivity is already leaning one way. Discrediting victim survivors was the most common form of victim blaming, and 233 instances, followed by behavioural blame and trivialization. So what I would say about discrediting victim survivors, from what I can read and what I've been able to kind of, my interpretation of the report is discrediting is when they're not automatically believed. They're questioned. And my argument with that, or my problem with that is that not what a court is meant to do? Is it not meant to question what is being alleged? If we take out questioning and judgments, why are we even in court? And I think that's the point of this. I think 100%. And I do you know what? I agree. I don't think these cases should be in family court. That doesn't mean I agree with what they're going for, but I don't think family court is the right arena for these complex types of cases. I've been saying that for a long, long time. But that's where we are right now. And if whatever they're trying to build that is away from family court is going to be influenced by all of this, then society has a problem, because this is very flawed and very biased. Behavioural blame, again, they lack context. In the report, they just take quotes. They don't tell us anything about the case. Don't tell us anything about the outcome of the case. So we don't know whether what the judge said or what, said in their order, well, was it within the case? Was it relevant? Again, not saying the words that the judge uses and the ones they pull out, I'm not saying they're all great. They're not. And judges definitely have a lot of work to do. I work with it all the time, and I'm appalled by some of the things that judges do and say. We're on the same page about that thing. My problem is the skewed angle that this report is showing it through. And again, I'm not against women, and I'm not saying women don't have a hard time. I'm just saying that I don't know anyone that's had a good time. Men, fathers, mothers, I don't know anyone that's had a good time in family court. And I'm struggling with this. It's only women that have this experience, because that's the other big flaw in this, is that by the looks of it, in their methodology, they've searched for sentences about her or she, not him and not his. So they're looking at it solely from comments that have been made about the woman. What if in the same report, the father was also, his concerns were also minimalized, trivialized, discredited? That changes it, but they're not looking for that. And again, that's a huge flaw. You're cherry picking, which again, huge red flag for me, because that's what I deal with day in, day out. Narcissists who cherry pick what they're going to show to fit their narrative. So anytime I see that kind of behavior, boom, I'm immediately on the defensive, because it reminds me of personal experiences within family court. And those are my clients that are constantly dealing with that kind of thing, where the evidence is cherry picked, the statements are cherry picked. And so when a report that is going to that is already being spoken about in Parliament is doing that, I think we all have a right to be concerned about that, because these are not the behaviours that we want to be seen to be supporting, no matter what side of the fence you're on with regards to that. And again, I get my other argument with this is it's so divisive. My opinion on family court is, if mothers groups and fathers groups came together and attacked the system, that would be far more powerful than attacking both the group and the system. For those of you that do any work on themselves, hey, sorry, connection dropped out there. So yeah, if you do work on yourselves in attachment relationships, there's a great book by Dr. Sue Johnson that talks about relationships and attachment, and it basically, the principle is relationships can get caught in kind of like a dance around particular problems, each bringing in their own core wounds, and they attack each other. But actually, what she advises is, don't attack each other, go after the cycle, this dance. And that's to form a more secure attachment. And whilst this isn't about individuals per se, I mean, it's always about individuals, but I think it still applies. I think if both groups came together and worked together, reform would happen a lot faster. But because one or both sides are trying to take control of this to make the system work for them, they're basically trying to play the system or control the system, there's going to be resistance to that, as there should be. That's not what I'm advocating for. I'm not advocating for anyone taking control of the system. I want personal power. I mean, ultimately, I agree. I don't think family court is the right space to do it. But what I want is for it to be a place where it is more healing than harmful. And I don't think reports like this help with that. So I've talked about the methodology being flawed. Also, how are judges supposed to make decisions if every time you challenge someone, you're being accused of victim blaming? That is what the evidentiary process and court process is all about. It is about trying to get to some sort of truth. And you do that by questioning. You do that by challenging. You do that by looking for discrepancies. And some of the examples are around how discrepancies are victim blaming. How can that be? If your story's changed, that's a red flag for a judge, because maybe the person telling it isn't as truthful. Now, I understand that there's lots of reasons for that, trauma, all that thing. But the point remains, the court process has to do some of these things. And, if I was a judge and I read this and I was thinking, okay, so I've got to act on this, it'd be like, well, I can't say anything. I literally cannot say anything. And I kind of think that's the point. I think this is about silencing, challenging allegations. So if allegations are made by a woman of domestic abuse, sexual harm, or rape, they're trying to basically say to judges, don't question it, just believe it. And that is not what our judicial system was set up for. That is going right back to the start. And actually, it's all the things that these feminists are fighting against and talking about with the patriarchy, because the patriarchy was set up to only believes certain sets of society, the rich and the powerful. So back in the day, if a rich white woman accused a black slave of stealing something, they were guilty without any investigation whatsoever, and they were hung from a tree and lashed and humiliated. And that's not to be too extreme, but that is kind of where this might go. Not hanging of trees or anything of that. But what I'm saying is this, and I'm certainly not bringing race into it to be dismissive of race at all. I'm just using it as an example of how this is going backwards. If we're looking to take a system where there's a difference of opinion, a mother's opinion, a father's opinion, two mothers' opinions, whatever the relationship makeup is, children's opinions, where there is difference, we should only believe one side based on these characteristics. That's where we've spent centuries moving away from. I don't think that's the right thing for us to be going back to. I just want to clarify, I do not mean any harm or offense in my explanation of how rich white people would make accusations against it. I'm not comparing the two to be the same thing. I just want to kind of say that's where we started, and it was awful and horrific, and we do not want to go back to that. I'm not saying we're in the same, that family court is that. So I hope that comes across. Also, based on their methodology, the way they've categorized things. So let me get to, here. So this is, you can't read it on there. So I do recommend getting it, but these are the categories that they've kind of come to. So let me bring it up myself. Discrediting, behavioural blame, trivialization, character assassination, shared responsibility, destruction, pathologizing, VB paraphrase, I don't know what that is, deflection, rationalizing action, stereotyping, gaslighting, false equivalency, distancing, normalization, and role reversal. So a fair few of them are essentially when the accused, which it doesn't actually state, but in the, if they're looking at women's experience, at least I would say the majority of them would be against a father's experience. Some of them will be against a mother and a mother, but some of them will be, most of them will be mother and father. So they're looking at this from the mother's perspective. So what they're saying is when a father defends themselves, which they call role reversal, or comes up with any alternative explanation, doesn't just say, oh yes, I'm a horrible person, I did that. That is classed as victim blaming. If the judge, I'm not saying the judge agrees, because again, we don't know the outcome, but if the judge listens to that argument, which they have a duty to do, and examine the evidence based on that, then those things are classed as victim blaming. So someone's attempt to defend themselves is seen as being victim blaming. And I'm going to use an example from popular culture here that is on the exact same level, but over the pond. So in America, there has been a big case with Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni. There's certain elements that are ongoing. And when one particular part that is ongoing is something called 47.1. This is a law that is brand new. It's a California law. It's looking at being rolled out across all the states. But this California law essentially says if a victim takes their perpetrator to court, and in doing that, the perpetrator files a defamation lawsuit against them and loses that defamation lawsuit, they are eligible for 3 times the amount money. So punitive damages, harm damages, and legal fees. It's a fee shifting law, but it's essentially a deterrent to stop people from having raising a defamation lawsuit against their victims, which on the face of it, I can understand how that would help victims. If you think about a powerful, we'll use the stereotypical, a powerful man, a powerful boss, because this is a workplace law as well, by the way. A powerful boss sexually harasses their junior employee, female junior employee, or male junior employee as well, could be. And the female or male, the victim, well, let's just use the word victim, regardless of gender. The victim goes to the police and goes through civil court, or goes to the CRD and gets their civil rights report to say you can go to court, and they win. Then the defamation suit, and the defamation suit is dismissed because it was filed with malice. It was filed to harm the victim. Then the perpetrator would have to pay the victim 3 times harm, which would be calculated in the court. Loss of earnings, loss of job prospects, emotional harm, all of that would be added up to a significant sum, and then it would be tripled. And so, in theory, I understand where it's come from. The problem is it's being weaponized by Blake Lively, whose sexual harassment claims were all thrown out and were absolutely nothing burgers. They were just ridiculous allegations to have made. And actually, she said far more sexually harassing things to Justin Baldoni than he said to her. But his defamation lawsuit was dismissed, but on legal grounds, and actually it wasn't fully dismissed. The judge gave them the option to resubmit on certain pleadings. They chose not to. So there's an argument going on about, anyway, the righteousness of that. I appreciate I've done quite a big deep dive there, but my point being that as part of this 47.1, amicus briefs were filed with New York court, which is where it's happening. California law, but they're trying to use it in New York. And so these New York charities, women's charities, all wrote to the court and basically said, look, whether Justin Baldoni is guilty or innocent in this, you should rule in favor of Blake Lively because it's really important for other victims. Which again is mind-blowing, because it goes back to what I was just saying about we're stripping our entire judicial system back to justice only being for certain people, which is, if it's working for you, you're really happy. But if you're going to create a system that only works for one group of people, what happens when you're on the outside of that group? You're not going to be quite as happy about that, are you? And so this is what's happening around the world at the moment, and this is just a part of it. And I don't know if it's coordinated. I don't know if people, Adrien Barnette, for example, is coordinating with people in America and New York about this as well. I'm sure they're having conversations, but they're essentially saying we believe survivors. And when questioned about, so what exactly did Blake experience, they're just lying and making stuff up, stuff that didn't even happen, stuff that wasn't in court reports, because they're more concerned with the ideology of it. And again, I get it onto one angle, that victims have had really bad treatment in the court system, whether that be civil court in America, family court here, criminal court here and there. I get that. I get the outrage behind it, but I don't think they're thinking it through in terms of the precedent that you can set for people who are more nefarious. And like I say, when it's working for you and you're on the inside and this is all working, you're not going to argue with it. You're going to be like, great, yeah, wonderful, this is working for me. And this is what I would say to anyone that's reading this report and thinking, well, I want this. I don't want to be victim blamed. No one wants to be victim blamed, but I want courts to change. I want it to be more in favour of mothers. I want all of that. Whilst I understand the trauma behind that, think about it the other way, is that if we're allowing courts to make decisions based solely on whether you fit into a certain sociological, economical group, gender group, now what happens when you're on the outside of that? Switching it from being on the outside to being on the inside is not the same, is not the way we want to go with this. So just bear that in mind. One final thing that I do want to say about the methodology on this is they deliberately chose appeal cases where they knew that there were going to be problems. It's already been identified that there were problems, which isn't a full reflection of what's happening in family court, because not every person can afford to go to appeal. So I'm not sure how this really shows the full range of people's experiences within family court if you're only basing it on those who can afford the appeal in the first place, and who Charlotte Proudman has worked with, who charges £1,000 an hour. There's not many people that are going to be able to afford that. So is this a true representation of everyone's socioeconomic gender backgrounds? No, it is not. It's very select. And so therefore the point that they're making is actually quite reductive, because they're saying there's gender bias, but they've produced a report which is in and of itself gender biased. So these are my ideas for solutions. If you want to do a report on gender bias, or you want to do a report on bias, or you want to do a report on failings in family court, I'm all for that, but make it sure it's the full picture. Make sure you speak to mothers and fathers. Make sure you include everyone. Come together. Include the other perspective. So search for him, his experience, and just see how that appears as well. Because to me, it's better saying victim blaming happens in family courts to everyone. Judges aren't very good at recognizing victims. To me, that's a stronger argument, and will push for proper reform than only one party, only one sex is receiving this, because I don't think that's true. I think that it's happening across the board. I think abusers are the only ones that are winning in this system. And I do have a problem with the victimhood as a whole. I think that this constant all mothers are victims, all women are victims, believe all women, is so dangerous, because what I've seen is that people, including women who don't agree with that, me and lots of other women out there who are critical thinkers, who have broader perspectives, who can see the bigger picture, are criticized and receive threats because you don't just go along with it. And how is that supporting all women? I know lots of women who are very balanced and have, see that, and they are wonderful women, and the sort of women that you want in power. What we don't want in power is people that are so blinded by their own experiences, their own egos, that they're trying to make everything about victimhood. Because when I'm a woman, I don't want to just be I don't want to be just a victim. If you want equality, let's go back, page 1, right to equality. That's what Charlotte Proudman has founded, this right to equality. What does equality mean? Well, it means that you can be equally good and equally bad. It doesn't mean that you're on a pedestal. It doesn't mean that you are always the victim. That's not what it means to me. That's not what feminism is to me. So these women are not speaking for me as a woman, and they're not, to me, feminist, because they're not fighting for equality. They're fighting for control. And again, that's a red flag for me because of the nature of the work that I do. I just want to do full circle and say, I am not saying that the people whose experiences are quoted in this report have not had a bad experience. I am not saying that people up and down the country right at this moment in time are not sat in family courts being treated horribly and being victim-based. I'm not saying that doesn't happen. I'm saying if you're going to write a report that you want to influence government, which they clearly do, make sure that you're thinking bigger picture about what you're trying to create. And I don't think that they've done that here. I think they're setting a very dangerous process, and that is not going to work out well for anyone. They might think it'll work out well for women, but I guarantee in the long run, it will not work out well for children, who are ultimately the future, which is very cliched, but it is true. So those are my thoughts. Challenge me if you want, that's fine. I have my own biases, as we all do, but this is my hopefully as bias-free opinion, as balanced opinion as possible. But let me know, do you agree, do you disagree, what do you agree with, what do you disagree with? I am open. I am a person. I'm not so entrenched in my own beliefs that I think I'm right all the time. I am definitely open to taking on other things. So share, let me know what you think. Take care, everyone.